Thank you so much. So about 7 years ago, we got a call from a very large brand that you probably would know to help with their responsive redesign of their product detail page. And this was, the days of sort of like responsive web design. It was really a big thing, and we were, a lot of organizations still hadn't made that transition, and so they hired us to come and work with them on a single page. But this was the single page that sold almost all of their products, and we're talking about billions of dollars of money, US dollars, of money being spent on this single page every year. So it was very scary to take this project. My company, Sparkbox, worked with this organization. We spent about a year on a single template, a single page for this customer. And we did a lot of testing and design and prototyping and obviously development, and we got this thing live after about a year. And it was a great success. And as we worked through that project, maybe about 3/4 of the way through, we looked at the work we had done and realized we had kind of inadvertently built a design system, or the beginnings of a system for them. And they had many more experiences in their e-commerce flow that they needed to also make responsive. And so we said, hey, we have the beginnings of a library of patterns for you that we think could help us do this work much easier. And so we talked with our peers inside the organization. They agreed this would be a good approach. And we spent the next few years, in fact, we're still working with them now on their design system. And early in those days of the design system work with them, about a year into that project, we got a call from this client, and they said, we need to stop all of the design system work. And this was one of our largest customers, so it was a very scary moment for us. And I think that is the moment that I realized I don't know enough about our customers and how they use systems or why they should use systems. And it started us on this journey of research. And so we have been, for the last 4 years, conducting the design system survey. We just released the results for 2021. I hope that some of you maybe have seen these studies or even participated in the surveys with us. If you have, thank you. A lot of what I'll share today will come from the data we've gathered here, along with lots of different work experience we've had with organizations, helping them with their design systems over the last 6 or 7 years. Design systems have lots of different definitions kind of floating around, so I'll share with you because I want us to all sort of be on the same page, sort of what I mean when I say a design system. And this is a common definition maybe that you would see. The key here is that design systems are more than pattern libraries. They provide much more guidance around the why, the when, and the how to use specific UI patterns. Oftentimes there's a documentation site where you can see all of this, read the docs, read the guidelines, and learn how to pull those into your project. And when they're done right, they become a shared language for your internal teams. They enable massive scale, beautiful efficiency, and they make it possible to do all of this while creating consistent experiences for your end customers. Now that's the answer that I would have given you yesterday in the morning if you asked me what a design system was. But I was on a walk with Vitaly, walking around Zurich, and he asked me this question, and it just kept sort of like itching my brain, He wanted to know, what's the future of design systems? He said, is everything going in this direction? And I started thinking, and I actually woke up this morning at about 2 in the morning and added a bunch of stuff to my presentation, so I hope this is okay. So I got a little sort of sentimental. I started thinking, why actually does any of this matter, right? Now, I think it's important, and I want to share with you why I have spent so much of my time, in fact, almost all of this year, researching this subject. And our organization for the last 4 years has done tons of research. And so I want to try that, but in order to do that, I'm going to need your help. So I'm going to show you a series of images, and I would like for you, without thinking, just to say what it is that you see on the screen. If we could all agree to use English, that would help me. Are you guys willing to try this with me? Yes? Okay, so here we go. Thank you. Table, yes. Bed. Chair. Table. And what should go here? Yeah, bed. Very good. All right, give yourselves a round of applause. Well done. You see, humans, all of us, are incredible at recognizing patterns, right? We walk into a room like this and we see chairs, right? And if I were to, well, this little experiment was so easy for you because you have that ability. You can see something that you've maybe never seen before. These specific chairs are new to you, but you can still see those and understand that you could sit in that chair. You could walk into a room with 1,000 unique chairs and 1,000 unique tables, and if I asked you simply to take a seat, you would know without even thinking to walk to a chair, slide it out, and have a seat. And you would know exactly how much effort it takes to slide that chair out without throwing it across the room. And you would trust that that table wouldn't just collapse because you've pulled the chair out from underneath it. And you would trust that that chair was strong enough to hold you, right? And this is because we have so much experience with these objects, but it's also because we have a shared language for describing these things, right? A lot of that information is encoded in this phrase, take a seat. And it's very simple, and you don't have to think or process or do any of that. You can just take a seat without worrying. But imagine what the work would be if 100 people walked into that room with 1,000 unique chairs and 1,000 unique tables, and we had to explain to each of them that each of those chairs was a chair, and that it was okay to pull it out, and that it would hold their weight when they sat down, right? There's so much in that we take for granted every day. And I think this is the power of language, right? It's the power of a shared understanding, and we take that for granted. And actually, design systems give us this very power, right? Now, if I asked you to codify, what is the pattern of a chair? And by codify, I mean, could you describe for me a set of rules that would allow any human to look at any chair and have that understanding? Could you do that? And maybe on the surface it seems simple, but it's actually quite difficult, right? You might say a chair has 4 legs. But we can look at our friends over here sitting on things that maybe don't have legs at all, you know? And is a small couch a chair? And also a table might have 4 legs, or it might have more. And what about the chair that a baby is sitting in, or a chair or a seat that is in your vehicle, right? There's so many different concepts, and they're all slightly unique, but we have the ability to match those patterns. And I just want to share with you the importance of this, because the power of a design system is not in its efficiency. It's not in its ability to offer accessibility to all of your products. It's not in its ability to create more consistent experiences. The power of a design system is that creating the system forces us to define what we mean when we talk about these ideas that we're trying to create. And the power of a design system is that it unifies our teams. It gives us a shared understanding and a common language. And it's really the way that we can create better work in what we do. So this is why it's so important to me, and this is why I've spent so much of my time thinking about these things. Now, I have so much to share with you, so the rest of this presentation is going to be a lot of content, okay? I will move through it quickly, but I want you to know at the end of today, I'm going to come over here into these comfy chairs with maybe more than 4 legs, and I will sit here, and anybody who wants to talk design systems, I would love for you to come and join me, okay? And we'll make some time, maybe right before the Mighty Mingle, to do that. But this is going to be a lot. I'm going to cover for you a design system maturity model that my team has developed over these years of research. There are 4 main concepts in this model. The first is 4 stages of maturity that systems move through. The second is how the origin story of a design system impacts its journey through those stages. And then I have 2 frameworks. One is a simple framework for how to mature your system in a very healthy way. And one is a framework to maintain stability once you've reached a certain level of stability, or of maturity. So let's jump right in. We'll start with the 4 stages of design system maturity. The first stage we simply call building version 1. And I'll just say as well, we've tried to make this very simple to understand. So the language is not theoretical, it's very common. And the idea is that this is practical and that hopefully you'll be able to walk away with some ideas to use. Building version 1, stage 1, this is the very earliest stage of design system maturity. All of the activities leading up to and including your very first official release are included in stage 1. The decisions that you make in stage 1 are critical for how things happen, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. At its core, this stage is really about discovering the right scope for your first version and finding partners throughout your organization that will help you build something valuable. Stage 2 we call growing adoption. And stage 2 begins as soon as that first official version is released. And in this stage, in almost every interview that I've done, once that first version of the site is live, the only thing people care about is getting other people to use it. And this is much more complicated than it seems. And so stage 2 is really focused on learning what it is that will be valuable to new subscribers to your system. Now, once you reach a critical mass of adoption, you'll transition into stage 3, which we call lovingly surviving the teenage years. And any of you who have teenage children maybe understand what I mean by this. With more subscribers using the system comes many more issues, right? Comes lots of people using the system in ways you probably never intended it to be used. And so there's a lot of challenges here. You'll have to demonstrate here that you're willing to support the people using the system in very interesting ways. And you'll probably have to figure out how to have others contribute back to your system in some way here. And then stage 4 we call evolving a healthy product. And this is really when the organization sees the system as an equal to external products that maybe you use the same tooling, you use the same processes, you have the same kinds of metrics in place that you would for typical external products. And I'll say that the experience every organization has moving through these stages is wildly different. As we were working through these concepts initially, I thought there would be no way to find a single set of stages that would apply to everybody. But it turns out that there is sort of a unifying concept we call origin stories, which greatly impacts how you move through these stages. So let me share those with you quickly. There are 2 primary origin stories. The first we call top-down. You can see what that means. Basically that your leadership is very involved at the very beginning, right? Top-down because leadership has said this is something we want to do and established it as a priority. And then the opposite, grassroots, which is also very common, which is where an individual contributor, a designer, a developer, a researcher, someone like this on the team feels like this would help them with their work. And so they start to build a system that would be helpful for folks like themselves. The easiest way to think about your origin story, if you have a design system, is to think about your leadership's involvement in the early days. And if you're looking at these, let's talk quickly just about some of the differences here. So between top-down and grassroots, there's a lot more visibility with top-down, obviously because leadership is involved. They're going to be asking lots of questions and asking for updates. Grassroots, oftentimes nobody knows about it except for the folks working on it. Top-down may have a formal budget established, but oftentimes there's no budget in a grassroots situation. There sometimes could be a sanctioned team in a top-down situation. Usually there's no team, or maybe 1 or 2 people just working on it in grassroots. There tends to be a much broader scope. We try to tackle more in our first release when leadership is involved, and I think that's because they see the potential impact this could have across the organization, and so they expect more from the system early on. In a grassroots situation, the individual contributor doing the work is focused on their own needs, and so they tend to have a more narrow scope. And then higher pressure to deliver, right? If your boss is breathing down your neck, you're going to have some pressure there. And really, there's sometimes often no pressure in a grassroots situation. Now, if you're looking at these 2 and thinking to yourself, I don't quite see myself in there, I'm some hybrid of those, that's very common. And that's because these 2 are actually sort of extreme ends of a spectrum. And I find it helpful to think about them kind of like this. Because the origin story is, as its name implies, about how the initial version of the system came to be, the differences between a top-down and a grassroots system will be pretty noticeable in stage 1. But as the system matures, these 2 will become more like each other, right? And the end goal, of course, is to have authentic support, both from your leadership and from the rest of the team, your peers, so that you have, in the end, a stage 4 system which is really sort of indistinguishable what the origin story was. Now, these are kind of the extreme paths, right? And so you might think a top-down system will become more like a grassroots system as it matures, and a grassroots system will become more like a top-down system as it matures, but there are lots of other ways that systems move through these stages, and this is a common pattern where early on it starts with an individual contributor, but they get buy-in very quickly from leadership once they explain what the potential is, and this shoots up into a top-down model where the leadership is very involved and hands-on. So there's lots of ways, and none of these are right or wrong, these are just paths, options for you. Okay, so let's talk quickly about that framework around how to mature. So we've covered the 4 stages, and we've talked about origin stories, and now I want to talk about just a simple way for you to think about how to move your system through these stages in a healthy way. There's really 3 key things you have to focus on no matter what stage you're in. And these 3 things all start with an E, so I call them the 3 E's. Educate, engage, and evolve. And what I mean by these, in terms of educate, is really about just informing the rest of the organization with what's happening. So spreading the word, casting the vision for the system. With engagement, we're talking about more interaction with folks in the organization. So getting people to help you, right? Getting people to help you test or even to submit design or code to the system. This is a 2-way interaction, a back and forth. And then evolution, we just mean making the system better, right? Always looking for ways to iterate and test that system. Now, one of the most common problems that I see in our client work is that the customers who are struggling are often focused on only 1 or 2 of these areas, and they're leaving one out completely. And many times we can look back at the history of their system and see there are areas where they didn't do these things. And so we can go back and help establish those practices for them, which sets them in a much healthier position to move forward. And these things are cyclical. It's not that you do the education, then do the engagement, then do the evolution, and then you're in the next stage. It's much more, we do these things continuously, and eventually you find yourself in the next stage. So we think about it as a cycle like this, and you can kind of layer these on top of these stages and think about it like this. And what's important to know is that the kinds of activities you do in stage 1 are different than what you need to add to those activities in stage 2. So each stage brings with it new activities inside educate, engage, and evolve. But you do have to kind of continue doing the ones from the earlier stages. So the work only gets harder as you go. So I normally would spend a lot of time talking through lots of details about each of these stages, but I don't have time to do that, so I'll quickly just mention a few things that I think are really critical. In stage 1, these kinds of activities for education are really about defining the design system, because a lot of times an organization just will not have a good understanding of what this means. And so it's really about understanding the context of your organization. No design system we've ever built has been the same as any other one. And that's because they have to live and breathe inside your organization. So you need to do the work to understand the context, and that's how you can help educate and define and make a case for this. Engagement here is really about discovery. It's about trying to sit and watch how your peers work and understand how every discipline could benefit from the system, and that's how you build something that's valuable that other folks in the team will want to use. And evolution, of course, you're in stage 1, you're just getting that first version live, so there's a lot of work to do early on, getting things set up. You're building the documentation site often. You're thinking about guidelines around usage and documentation, that kind of thing. In stage 2, growing adoption, the education, we have to continue doing the things from stage 1, but we add a bunch of new tasks. And these lists that I'm sharing are not, this is not everything, right? These are just examples. But here you have a system, so you can start to demo it, right? And I encourage our clients to record those demos, and we put those out on the doc site and make them visible for folks who want to come and see the history of the system and how it has changed. You're going to share stories of adoption. In fact, I always recommend you share stories where it was a struggle to get one of your product teams to adopt, but also to show that you supported them through that adoption and got it working for them. And that's really encouraging for product teams to see this is something that will last, and they're actually going to support me through the transition. Engagement here is about gathering feedback. You're going to have a roadmap for your system like you would any other product, and so ask for different folks who maybe even aren't subscribers yet to understand what would make the system something they want to use. and think about how to prioritize those things. You're going to be working with leadership, hopefully, or at least if you're not, if you haven't yet, to start asking for support and budgets and things. Evolution here, it's really about making the adoption easy for folks. So you're going to continue to always adding components and iterating on the system itself, but also thinking about what documentation is needed to make it so you don't have to be super involved when a new product team or subscriber wants to use the system. Lots of things that have to happen. In stage 2, you have to prioritize because so many ideas will come to you about things that you could do, but you have to focus on the ones that will add the most value. Stage 3, this is where we start to see very sophisticated communication strategies, newsletters and, open office hours and, in terms of engagement, we see folks doing ambassador programs where they're sending somebody from the design system team out to work on a product team for a short time. Or maybe even when new people come in to the business as a new employee, they might do a small stint on the design system team and learn how to use the system first, and then go out to a product team and go as an advocate for the system. So there's lots of interesting ways that we do these things in stage 3. Evolution here continues to be about evolving the system, but also thinking about the processes we use, right? How do we govern content? What is it like when someone wants to make a contribution back? What are the rules that they have to follow? And how do they understand that the work they're offering back to you will be valuable to the system? Improving everything, essentially. And then in stage 4, it's much, you're essentially, if you've done this well, the design system team will have a seat at the table for lots of difficult conversations and some fun conversations, right? Thinking about the future of a business oftentimes. So you're thinking about how the system can support new initiatives inside the organization. You're also doing lots of work to capture metrics and demonstrate the actual value you're offering. Engagement, again, continuing to interact with your subscribers, understanding new needs as they come. Again, an active participation in the vision of the organization. And, really we see some really interesting stuff happening in the evolution here where you're making sure that the system is the best way to build products. And in fact, stage 4 design system teams are looking at coming technology and actually doing work that's not even needed yet inside their organization to show. Perhaps you use React and your organization's thinking about trying Vue. Maybe you're doing some sprints to say, we're going to try some of this with Vue.js instead. And there's no product using it yet, but you're showing we're ready to do this work, right? And that's how you're staying sort of current and staying part of the conversation. Okay, a lot to cover there. And again, after the sessions today, meet me over here and we can talk in a lot more detail about all of these, okay? The 4th framework that I'll share with you is just on system stability. And in a lot of the conversations that I've been having with the internal design system teams we've done interviews with, we've been able to sort of identify 3 primary stabilizing forces. They are authority, value, and tradition. So we'll take a quick look at each. The authority stabilizing force means that leadership actively supports the design system team and their goals. And this gives the design system team a lot of confidence to make decisions, right? They know leadership has their back. And I would say the word actively is critical. So if you can't point to very specific things that your leadership is doing to support you in this way, then you probably aren't benefiting from this force of stabilization. The kinds of things that you see in design systems that have this stabilizer are real budgets and dedicated time and staff. And leadership when this stabilizing factor is in force, they're not asking people just to use the system. They're actually inviting lots of teams around the organization to participate in the system's evolution. And that's a critical differentiator. It's not enough to just ask people to use it. They have to actively participate in its evolution. The value stabilizing force means that the system offers true value to those who use it. You could also say that the people who are using the system are using it because it actually helps them with their work. If you want to make a system that has good adoption, you have to build something that helps people. You can't make it more difficult for them to do their job. The kinds of things you see in design systems that have this stabilizer are very rapid adoption, a lot of feedback from users, feature requests and bug reports and those kinds of things. And oftentimes when the system is really valuable, people are very interested in helping, but they want to contribute because it is a valuable asset for the organization. Now, the tradition stabilizer is a little bit different. It means the system has become the way that we work, right? It's the way we build products. And once a system has taken root, there's actually a lot of stability simply in its acceptance across the organization. Now, a sign that you have the tradition stabilizer is when folks from many disciplines say things like, our design system is the single source of truth. Hopefully, maybe you've heard that if you do this work. Now, you can't just have any of these, but especially the tradition stabilizer, right? It requires having authority, having value, and doing that for an extended period of time, and that's kind of how you become a tradition inside the organization. And remember that design systems are literally asking everybody to change how they work. So it's difficult, to ask that kind of thing of folks, and only after that change has been made can you really have this tradition stabilizer. Now you can think about these stabilizers as the legs of a tripod, right? So if you have one, it means your system is very not stable, right? It can fall in any direction. Any force from any direction will knock it over. But if you have two of them, then maybe, it can move this way and this way, but it can't move, right, in this direction. And if you have all three, it's stable in every direction. And that's really kind of what we want if we want to build a system that's sustainable and that can last. So this is our goal, right, is having all three. Now, we can actually layer in the origin stories to this as well, right? It's likely, if you're a top-down origin story, that your first stabilizing force is going to be authority, right? And in this case, you have to focus primarily on evolving the design system in a way that makes it extremely valuable for different types of subscribers. And this moves you toward the center of this Venn diagram by way of the value stabilizer. And only after you've proven that value can you earn the tradition stabilizer. And the opposite is true, right? If your system was initiated by an individual contributor, you're a grassroots origin story, then your likely first stabilizer will be value, right? In this case, you have to make sure you're educating your leadership on the value of your system regularly, and you have to do that using their language. And this moves you towards the center of the Venn diagram by way of the authority stabilizer. And only after you've gathered support from leadership can you actually earn the tradition stabilizer. Now, unfortunately, once you have these, you don't always get to keep them. So it's possible, of course, that you can lose these. A quick example might be that if you have all three, but you slow down the evolution of your system, say, then you become less valuable, and you find yourself in this place where you have authority and tradition, but the system isn't actually valuable for folks. This is a very risky place to be because people are going to start to doubt that this is something they should use. They're not going to feel trusted to make good decisions to doing their work, right? Another example is this idea of avoiding authority. And you'll recall that story that I told, right? I said, we got a call from that client, and they said, stop the work on the design system. Well, I learned what had happened after a few weeks. It turns out that they had spent enough money on the design system work that some threshold was crossed in an executive spreadsheet somewhere. And that leader said, hey, what is this thing that we're spending all this money on? Why have we spent so much money on something called a design system, and I don't know what it is? And so they came back to us and they said, hey, we're getting questions about the value of this. And what we had done unintentionally, was we built something really valuable. And lots of teams throughout this organization were using this system, but we had never gone to leadership and asked for budgets. We had never gone to leadership and asked for a team. It was just part of the work. It was very grassroots. And so we found ourselves in this situation, right? We had created something really valuable, and it was actually becoming the way the organization worked, but leadership didn't know, and so there was no authority given. And so we were able to go back to about 12 different products inside that organization who were all using the system, and we asked them, over the last year when you've used this design system, can you tell us roughly how long would it have taken you to do the work you did without the system? And we had the data for how long it had actually taken. And so then we could look and compare the math. And we learned that for every dollar they spent on the design system, they saved roughly $3 just in developer efficiency. And so that was good enough for the leadership, right? And we found ourselves then back in the center of this tripod of stability, and we had buy-in from the leadership. We had bigger budgets. We had the okay to go and hire, and it was a very good situation. Had we not been prepared, of course, that could have been the end of the system, right? It would have destabilized completely. So altogether, this kind of gives us a way to create stability in our systems once we have a system that is built. So we have a good overview here, right? We've talked about the 4 stages of maturity, 1 through 4. And I'll tell you, again, there is so much more to this. I have full-day workshops worth of content that I would love to share with you. And one last reminder that at the end of today, I will come over here. So anybody who wants to talk in more detail, I would love to hear your stories. But I'll just leave you with a few resources as well, okay? I mentioned early on that we have the design system survey. So this is our 4th year doing the survey. And I'm really excited. The team released this maybe a month ago. So there's a lot of interesting insights this year. This URL will take you directly to the results page, but you can also get to the last 3 years of survey results from there as well. So there's a lot of good stuff here. I would encourage you to take a peek at this. Hopefully you can find something valuable there. We've also developed a design system maturity assessment. So I'm just curious, I should have asked this at the beginning. How many of you are working on a design system in some capacity now? Okay, all right, good. So if that's the case for you, this would be something that might be valuable. You can go and literally it takes you 5 minutes to answer just 10 questions or so. And using the answers of those questions, we kind of look at the patterns we've found in the data we've gathered, and we can kind of help you figure out which stage you're in. And we give you some very customized feedback on things that could be helpful in terms of making good decisions for the next few stages. So you can check that out. That might be helpful. And I'll make sure that I tweet all of these URLs after the talk too, if you don't want to take notes or take pictures now. We've also developed a design system calendar. We were trying to think of a way, because there's so much information and there's so much you have to do this work well, but it can be very overwhelming. So what we did is we made a little calendar you can subscribe to, and on Mondays it'll create a little tiny all-day event for you, and you can open that if you want or not, but if you choose to on a Monday morning, it'll just give you content right in the description of that calendar event and some links out to resources. And what it does is just remind you to think a little bit differently about systems, to think about them more like an actual product. So if that's of interest to you and you just feel like you need that nudge each week to think a little differently about your system, maybe it would challenge a way that you're thinking, this could be a good resource for you as well. And then I published an article not too long ago on a list apart that is, a lot of what you end up doing in design system work is you have to be a salesperson. And I think I'm probably like many of you that I didn't become a web person or a designer or a developer because I liked selling stuff. But unfortunately, that's just part of the work. And if you want to do this work well, you have to learn how to sell it internally. And so this article takes, I would say, the last 5 or 6 years of my experience having to be the guy that's going and selling this to people internally inside the organizations we work with. And it boils it all down to a few different things that have worked really well for us. And it's a lot also about language. It's about changing the way that we talk about systems to speak directly to the things that leadership actually cares about. So I hope this might be helpful for you as well. And I also want to say this is all research, right? So none of this is 100% guaranteed, but we're always working on this. And if you have a story of a design system that's different or that doesn't align with these stages in some way, I need to hear that. So it would mean a lot to me if you're willing to come find me here. I'll be around the next couple days. But also you can send me an email here. I would be happy, even if you just have interesting stories to share. I'm gathering all of those. So I would love to hear your story. Any advice that you have, any interesting stories you have. And of course, none of this happens, this is not just me, right? I have a team of over 50 people back in the States, and they are all brilliant, and they have spent so much time helping make this research possible and these ideas possible. So I just want to make sure that I say that this wouldn't be possible without them. They're wonderful folks. I love that I get to work with them every day. If you want to see their smiling faces, you can go to sparkbox.com and see them there. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that we have a few moments for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben. That was fantastic. I would like to quickly ask a question off the app. If I'm starting out, kind of back to the authority piece, if I'm just starting out with a design system, how do I approach leadership and convince them they should invest in it?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I would say there's a couple ways to answer it. One is that you don't necessarily have to right away. You know, we've seen a lot of successful systems that started in that sort of grassroots mentality, right? So they didn't have support or buy-in from leadership. The path you take is very different. You know, it's going to be a narrow focus. You're going to solve problems for your specific discipline firstly. But if you choose to say, I want to go all out and I want to get buy-in from leadership, you have to do the work for the context of your organization. So what I would do is look to understand who are the leaders that could cause this to fail, and I would get to know them a little bit and try to understand what's important to them. And then I would shape the project in a way that shows value to them early on. Because if you can change their minds and make them an advocate for the idea, you won't have any trouble, right? So shifting your language to speak in the kinds of things that they care about. That article I shared from A List Apart it answers that question, you know, so that would be a good resource too. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've spoken like somebody who knows from experience. The first question on my list here is, which tool do you use as a documentation layer of a design system?
We've only used, I don't think we've used any of them more than once. And this is what I meant when I say that, like, the design systems we've built are all so unique based on the needs of an organization. If you think about it, a system, I was just talking with someone on my team about metrics for a design system, and like you think about it like this: if you wonder how often is a button, just like the simplest thing, how often is a button used, right? That seems like an easy thing for us to be able to measure, but the truth is it's really hard to measure that, because what does it mean to use that button? Does that mean it's in production code, in a product live somewhere? What if they change the border radius on the button in production? Does that count as it being used? What if they use the button in a UX prototype? That's a very different tool, right? How do we connect the use of that button in research or design or prototyping to its use in a GitHub repository somewhere that a dev included, right? So you have to cross all these thresholds of tooling to make to build a system. And so we've used lots, but it's all dependent on the technology and tools and experience of the teams who are going to use the system. So I know that's not an answer, and I'm sorry for that, but that's the truth.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
This is another kind of technical question. Do you have tips of how to correctly handle versioning of a design system?
Oh, there's so many schools of thought on this, yeah, and it's so important. We have built systems that are both, you know, a single sort of repository where if you upgrade, you're upgrading the entire system. We've also built systems where every component has its own versioning. And again, it's going to depend on the needs for your organization. So whoever asks that, come find me and we'll talk more details, okay? I don't know how else to answer that, but yeah.
Let's see what else we have here on the...
Yeah. There's so many pros and cons for both options of versioning, and there's everything in between. There are some cool tools, I'll say too, coming out. I'll maybe share a link or two that handle some of the complexities of having individual components versioned independently, so that take a lot of they can automate a lot of that for you, which can be very helpful if that's a direction you're leaning.
This is kind of interesting. Design systems have been a topic in front-end design for many years. Has it become a mainstream established practice inside organizations from what you've seen?
I think it's definitely getting there. In the surveys that we do, we have some folks now, when we first started those 4 years ago, the oldest systems were a year or two old. Now we have some that are 6 years old, right? And these systems have been around, they're very mature, they have dozens of people on these teams, right? Sometimes many more. And so I definitely think it's becoming inside organizations that care about design, that care about the intention of the interfaces they're building. It's definitely becoming a thing. Different organizations care about systems for different reasons, and so I think a lot of the more engineering-focused organizations adopt them because they see it as a way to be efficient, which can create a challenge, right? It's a lot of times we think about innovation and efficiency as opposing forces. If I'm being efficient in my work, I don't have space to be innovative, But I think about it a little differently. I think that systems create more space because they are efficient. So you still need space for innovation, but if you're focused on always solving the same problems over and over with your design, you don't have space for innovation. So systematizing some of those decisions that have been made and then allowing that part of the process to be faster means you have more space early on to innovate and actually come up with better solutions. So these two can work together, Yeah.
Beautifully put, yeah. Maybe one more question. Which tools can you recommend for building and maintaining a design system?
All of you tooling people, we need to have a meeting over here, okay? The tooling is definitely maturing. A lot of our clients are moving from whatever design or prototyping tools they were using into Figma because Figma has done so much, to help and moving in this more systematic way. They even have some of their own analytics for systems, and you can look and see somebody used this Figma component, but they modified it. They broke its connection to the original, right? So now I can get reports back on that, and that's fascinating for system people, But that's not enough. There's I think one of the things we're struggling with right now is that we think of design systems in terms of designers and developers. And designers build them or design them, developers build them, and designers use them to do the design, and developers include them in their projects to create more consistency. But a design system that's well built can serve every discipline that's involved in the product work you do. So if you think about your QA team, right, a design system could tremendously help them. Having a place where all of the actual finalized, this is how it should look, this is how it should function, exists, that's huge for QA, right? It could benefit your IT group who's in the background somewhere and they're trying to build some portal for the organization. They don't have designers, but now they could use the system and they could actually put a layer of interface on a portal that looks good and it aligns with the brand. It can help researchers, right? I can prototype very quickly if I have a good system that's easy to use. So I think we have to expand the way we think about them. And the problem is the tooling, none of the tooling spans all of the disciplines yet. So that's what I'm looking for. We can talk about tools and things, but it's all dependent on the needs of the organization. Yeah.
Hey, Ben Callahan, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you
so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.